I am Noah. Day 5 inside this ark, and the air feels heavier than wood. The sound of rain is no longer a noise, it's the pulse of this place. The rhythm we live by. The animals have learned it, the children hum to it, and I've started hearing it even when it stops. This morning began like every other. Darkness, the smell of pitch and sweat, the restless whispers of beasts. I woke before dawn, though dawn means little here. There's no light, only degrees of darkness. When I stepped onto the main deck, Shem was already awake. He was kneeling by the cages, whispering to the doves. He has a patience none of the others inherited. They sleep less each day, he said. Maybe they're counting the rain too. Nama passed behind us with a bucket of gray water. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from another night of restless breathing. The lower deck stinks worse, she muttered. If the flood doesn't kill us, the smell will. I didn't answer. There's nothing new to say about the smell. It's in the air, in the food, in our hair, in our skin. It clings like a second life that refuses to leave. By mid-morning, the noise of wings drew my attention. The birds, especially the ravens, had grown louder these last few days. Their cries echoed through the hull like tiny storms inside the bigger one. Cam was feeding them when I heard the sharp crack. A hinge from one of the cages snapped, splintering the edge of the wooden frame. "Hold it," I shouted, but the bird was faster. A black streak of feathers and wind brushed my face. The raven shot past us, beating its wings with a sound like torn paper, and vanished through the small vent above the storage beams. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then Nama screamed, close it," but the damage was done. The bird was gone free into the endless gray beyond. We stood there, staring at the empty space where it had been. Ham swore under his breath. Shem whispered something I couldn't catch, and for the first time since the ark closed, no one moved. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was awe. Cam broke it first. "He'll die out there," he said. "There's nothing but water." Me that's better than this," Ham replied quietly. Nama turned on him. "Don't say that." "Why not?" Ham said. At least he had the courage. I wanted to stop them, to speak sense, to remind them of why we were here, but my mouth refused to open. I kept thinking about the raven, slicing through the rain like a black knife, vanishing into the clouds. It wasn't courage or madness, it was desperation. We spent the rest of the morning fixing the broken hinge, binding it with rope and pitch. I worked beside Cam in silence, feeling the weight of eyes on me, my sons waiting for an order, my wife waiting for a reason. When we finished, I took a moment to breathe. The ark rocked gently beneath us. The rhythm of the waves had changed, softer now, slower. I imagined the bird gliding somewhere out there, wings heavy with rain, eyes searching for anything dry. After the repairs, I gathered everyone. "No one touches the vents without me," I said. My voice sounded rough, older. "We can't lose another," Shem nodded. Cam didn't. Ham looked away. Nama sat on a crate, her hands trembling. "It's just a bird," she said softly. "But it feels like something's missing now." I didn't correct her. Because she was right. The air inside the ark had changed since that moment. It wasn't just the bird that escaped. It was the illusion of control. By afternoon, the mood was strange. The children whispered questions no one wanted to answer. The animals were restless again, maybe sensing the emptiness above them. I tried to distract myself with work, checking barrels, tightening knots, writing notes on wood with bits of charcoal. At one point, Cam came to me. "Do you think he'll find land?" I hesitated. "No." "Then why did he go?" "Because he didn't know that." Cam nodded slowly, then said, "Maybe that's the only reason anyone does anything." Nama brought me a piece of bread and sat beside me. She looked at the vent above. "Do you think he'll come back?" "If he finds no rest, yes," I said. "And if he finds rest, then he won't." She smiled sadly. "Maybe that's hope then. Leaving and not needing to come back." That night, the storm softened. The ark no longer groaned. It whispered. The wood swelled less, and for once, no one argued. We sat in silence, listening to the rain. Even the lions were quiet. Before sleep, I wrote on the inside wall of the main post, "One of the birds escaped today, and no one dared to call it crazy." Then I looked toward the vent. Somewhere out there, The bird was flying, or floating, or gone. But in my mind, I saw something else. A shadow circling above the waves, refusing to sink. For the first time in days, the thought didn't scare me. It comforted me. Maybe freedom isn't about surviving. Maybe it's just about not asking permission anymore. As I blew out the lamp, I could have sworn heard wings again, faint, distant, and wrong somehow. Not one, but many. I told myself it was the wind, but part of me wasn't sure. The fifth day inside the ark began quieter than the others, but it wasn't peace, it was the kind of silence that follows a loss. We all felt it. The missing bird had left an invisible hole in the air. Every flutter of wings reminded us of the absence. Nama kept busy with the small chores. She was scrubbing the corner by the feed barrels, though there was little left to clean. If I stop moving, she said, I'll start thinking. I knew what she meant. Thinking is dangerous here. Thoughts circle like vultures until they find a wound to feed on. Shem and Cam argued again, this time about the ropes near the vent. You tied them too tight, Cam said. You'll make the wood crack. And you tied yours too loose, Shem answered. And that's why we have birds flying away. I stepped between them. Enough. It wasn't the rope's fault. It was Chance. Ham, who had been quiet until then, looked up from his work. Chance doesn't break rope, father. Hands do. The room went still. Even the animals paused, as if listening. I didn't answer him, because maybe he was right. Maybe I tied that hinge too weakly. Maybe my hands built this whole miracle just strong enough to leak. By midday, the rain outside softened to a drizzle. The world was still drowned, but the constant hammering had stopped. You could almost imagine sunlight behind the clouds. We opened the vent for the scheduled air change, 10 breaths. No more. The wind that came through was cooler, thinner. I could smell salt, not just rain. Maybe the ocean was settling. Maybe we were floating above places that once had names. Nama stood by the open, eyes closed, lips moving. I think she was counting. When I called 10, she didn't move. She kept her face toward the gap until I touched her shoulder. Then she said softly, I thought I heard wings. The others crowded around, but there was nothing, just mist and the faint hiss of the sea. Still, everyone listened for a while, pretending they heard it too. That night, when we ate, the topic came back. You think it's still alive? Asked Cam, tearing his bread in half. Shem shrugged. Birds know things. Maybe it found land. Ham scoffed. There is no land, Nama spoke quietly. Then why did it go? Ham looked at her. Because even drowning is a kind of freedom. The words hit me harder than the smell of rot that hung in the air. I wanted to tell him to stop speaking like that, but the truth was too close. We slept in fragments that night. Every creak of wood sounded like wings. Every gust of wind, like a distant cry. Around the third watch, I woke and went to check the vent. The air was thicker, heavy with moisture, and something else, a faint, sweet odor I couldn't place. I leaned close and listened. Somewhere out there, beyond the rain, something was moving. Not waves, not wind, something alive. When morning came, I told myself it had been a dream. But Shem came to me after breakfast, eyes pale and wide. Father, come see. He led me to the bird enclosure. One of the doves was perched differently than before, its feathers darkened with moisture. Around its neck was a thin strand of green, a piece of weed or reed. Where did it get that? I asked. Cam said, maybe from the feed. Maybe it pulled it from the grain. But I knew better. The grain was dry. The reed was fresh, wet, new. Nama reached out, touching the small green strand like it was proof of something sacred. Maybe the water's falling, she whispered. Ham frowned. Or maybe the dead are rising. The rest of the day passed in strange expectation. No one said it, but we all kept glancing toward the vent, as if waiting for a knock. Evening came. The air grew colder. The animals began to settle. Except the ravens, they were restless again. Their cries sounded sharper, more deliberate. Then came the knock. Not from outside the door, but from above. A single thump on the upper beams, followed by another. Wood against wood. Cam shouted, something's on the roof. We froze. I grabbed the lamp and climbed the narrow stairs. The air at the top was freezing. When I reached the vent, I heard it again, a soft scrape, like claws dragging across wet timber. Nama's voice floated up from below. What is it? I didn't answer. I opened the vent slightly. Rain spilled in, cold and violent, but I didn't care. I held the lamp high, shielding the flame with my hand. For a second, I saw a shape on the roof, crouched near the edge, black, slick, alive. It turned its head toward the light, and I saw a glint eyes, reflecting amber. The raven, it was alive. It stared at me for one impossible moment, then spread its wings. The rain seemed to part around it as it rose into the gray. I watched until it vanished again into the mist. Then I shut the vent and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. When I climbed down, Nama was waiting. Was it him? She asked. Yes. Her lips trembled. Then there's still something out there. None of us spoke after that. The ark creaked and swayed, but I didn't hear it. All I could hear was the echo of wings in the storm. And beneath it all, one thought kept circling in my mind. If the bird could find us again, maybe we're not as lost as we think. But a darker thought followed. If it could find us, maybe something else could too. The morning after the raven's return was unlike any before. The rain sounded lighter, but the air inside felt charged like the ark itself had been listening. Everyone moved slower, listening for sounds we didn't have names for. Nama refused to leave the upper deck. He'll come again, she said. Birds remember where they find warmth. I didn't argue. If believing gave her peace, I wouldn't steal it. Hem muttered that the raven's return meant nothing. Maybe it just circled back, because there's nowhere else to go. Shem frowned. Then where is only land? That's not land, Ham said. That's a prison with animals. I tried to stop the argument, but my voice barely carried. The days of damp air had coated my lungs in something thick. When I spoke, the words came out softer than I intended. Even a prison can save a life. Ham looked at me with eyes that weren't angry anymore, just tired. Then what are we saving it for? That question stayed with me for hours. We spent most of the day doing maintenance. The ropes had swollen again from the humidity, and Cam was rewrapping the joints. I worked beside him, tightening bolts that never stayed tight. The smell of pitch was worse than ever, sharp and metallic. Nama came down at midday to bring water. Her hands shook when she held the cup. I saw something, she said. What? Outside. Beyond the vent. You've been looking again? I can't help it. I keep hearing wings. Kem looked up. It's just the storm playing tricks. No, she said. This was different. The rain was falling straight, but something moved against it fast. Ham laughed. Maybe your bird came back with friends. Nama didn't smile. Maybe he didn't come back alone. That silenced us all. By afternoon, we heard it again, the faint tapping above the ceiling beams. It wasn't thunder. It was deliberate, measured, like something stepping across the roof. Shem climbed the ladder to check, but when he opened the vent, there was nothing. Just wind. Empty, he said. Still, the tapping came back later that evening, louder this time. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 2 more. Nama grabbed my arm. It's him, she whispered. He's telling us something. But when we opened the vent again, the sky was black and empty. Night fell hard. The lamps flickered against the wet air. Every sound felt magnified. The ark breathed like a living thing, wood expanding, ropes stretching, animals shifting in their sleep. I sat near the central post with my logbook, pretending to write. What I was really doing was counting heartbeats between the knocks. Cam joined me after a while. Father, he said. You think there's more out there? Other arcs, maybe? No, I said. There was only this one. Then why does it sound like someone else is knocking? Before I could answer, a gust of wind struck the hull. The entire ark shuddered. A roar rose from below. The lion startled awake, the cattle bellowing. I ran down with Shem, checking for leaks. Nothing broke. Nothing leaked. The storm had just shifted its weight. But Hem said he heard something else, a cry that wasn't animal. The sea's full of ghosts now, he muttered. Maybe one climbed on top. Stop talking like that, Shem snapped. Why? You think the flood spared only us? You think the rest of them just sank quiet? I shouted for silence. My voice cracked but held. No one leaves the deck tonight. No one goes near the vent. They obeyed. For a while later, I found Nama standing by the vent again, the lamp behind her casting her shadow like wings. You promised, I said. I just needed to know if it was still raining. And it is, but softer, like the skies running out of tears. She smiled faintly, but there was fear in her eyes. What if the bird found something and is trying to tell us? There's nothing to tell, I said. If he found land, we'll know soon enough. But when I said it, I realized how hollow it sounded. That night, the ark was restless again. The horses kicked at the boards. The goats bleated in short, frantic bursts. Even the lions were pacing. The air vibrated with unease. Then came a sound that froze all of us, a single thud on the upper deck, followed by the distinct scratching of claws. Not the quick flutter of wings, this was heavier. Nama gasped. It's back. I grabbed the lamp and climbed. The vent was closed but trembling, as if something pushed from the other side. The scratching grew louder. I reached for the latch, but Cam shouted from below, "Don't open it." Too late. The latch gave way. The panel swung wide, and rain burst through in a silver sheet. I held up the lamp, its flame fighting the wind. Through the water, I saw the shape again, a bird, larger this time, drenched and trembling. It landed just inside the frame, claws gripping the wood. It wasn't the raven, it was a dove. Its feathers were streaked with mud. In its beak was a small piece of bark. Nama gasped. It's from a tree, Shem whispered. Then land. But before we could finish, the dove released the bark and fluttered backward out into the storm again. Gone as quickly as it came. We stared at the wet scrap lying on the floor, a piece of bark, dark, torn, real. The air in the ark changed in that instant. Hope and dread arrived together. If there was land, we might soon see it. But if the bird could reach us again, something else might too. When I closed the vent, I thought I heard a distant cry carried by the wind. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't thunder. It was something deeper, something calling our names. The ark hasn't felt the same since the dove came. We've all been breathing differently, like the air learned a new word and hasn't stopped whispering it. Hope. That's the word Nama keeps using. But hope feels too loud for this place. The piece of bark sits on the table where I write. It's small, barely the size of my thumb, but its smell earthy, sharp, alive, cuts through the damp and rot. Every time I breathe it in, my chest tightens. It reminds me of something I thought we'd lost forever, land. Cam spends his hours staring at it. If there's bark, he says, there must be branches. And if there are branches, there must be trees. Ham snorts. Or driftwood. Or corpses clinging to it. Shem frowns. Why do you always need to ruin everything? Ham doesn't answer. He just looks at the ceiling as if expecting it to fall. Nama has become quiet again, but not empty. She moves softly through the corridors, checking the animals, whispering to them as if preparing them for something. Soon, she says, just a little longer. I don't ask what she means by soon. By midday, the rain slowed to a thin mist. For the first time, we could hear the water sloshing gently against the hull instead of pounding it. The silence outside was heavier than any storm. We opened the vent carefully. The air that entered was cool and clean, smelling faintly of salt and something green life. The entire ark seemed to exhale. Even the animals went still, as if listening. Then we heard it. A sound like a distant cry, sharp, high, almost human. It came from beyond the vent, carried by the wind. Nama's eyes met mine. Did you hear it? I nodded. Shem whispered, it's the bird again. But I knew it wasn't. The sound was too long, too heavy, as if it came from a mouth that hadn't spoken in days. We closed the vent quickly. The air inside changed again, hope shrinking back into fear. The rest of the afternoon passed in silence. Every creak of the wood made someone jump. The children didn't speak. Even the lions lay still. At dusk, I decided to check the upper deck myself. I took the lamp and climbed the ladder. The boards were slick, and the smell of pitch mixed with rainwater filled my nose. I reached the vent and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Only the faint hiss of mist sliding against wood. Then something brushed the outside light, deliberate, like fingers trailing over the ark's skin. I froze. The lamp trembled in my hand. Another brush. Then a sound, soft tapping, like knuckles on a door. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only another knock. 3. Slow, even. I should have closed the vent and gone back down. But curiosity and dread share the same heartbeat. I lifted the latch. Cold air rushed in, along with the smell I hadn't known in weeks. Fresh grass. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Then I saw it. A feather stuck in the corner of the frame. White. Not black like the ravens. White like the doves. Nama's voice floated up from below. "Noah, it's fine," I called. But my voice was shaking. I reached for the feather, and when my fingers brushed it, I noticed something else beyond the vent. Shadows moving. Not birds this time. Bigger. Slower. I blinked. The shapes vanished. I shut the vent hard. When I came down, the others were waiting. Ham was pacing. "What did you see?" "Nothing," I said. "Don't lie. Nothing that matters." He glared at me. "You looked afraid." "I'm tired," I said. "We all are." Shem noticed the feather in my hand. "That's new." "Yes," I said. "The dove left it." Nama reached for it. "Maybe she's building a nest somewhere. Maybe she found a tree." Her voice cracked on the last word. That night, no one slept. The ark creaked less, but the silence felt wrong, too deep, too wide. I stayed awake, listening. I kept hearing faint noises, scratches, drips, distant echoes of movement. Sometime after midnight, I went back to the vent one more time. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining the sound. The world outside was still dark, but there was light now, a pale shimmer across the waves, like the first hint of dawn. I leaned closer, and the air that came through carried a new scent. Mud. Mud meant ground. My hands began to shake. I closed the vent carefully and whispered to myself, "We're close." When I turned to leave, I heard something behind me, a thud, heavy and wet, from the roof above. Then another, and another. Not footsteps. Drops. I looked down. A line of dark water was snaking along the wall. It wasn't rainwater. It was thick, dark, almost black. Pitch? No, it smelled different. Metallic. I followed the trail to the edge of the deck where it dripped through the boards. I leaned down, holding the lamp low, and froze. The liquid was dripping from the inside of the ceiling, not from outside. Something was bleeding inside the ark. I called for Shem, but the sound died in my throat. The lamp flickered once, then went out. In the darkness, I heard it again. Wings. Not above. Behind me. Inside. A rush of air brushed my neck. I turned, and in the faint gray light, I saw movement, something perched high in the rafters. Small, hunched, still. The shape tilted its head, and the faint gleam of eyes caught the light. Not the raven, not the dove. Something else. It watched me, then it opened its wings, and for an instant, I saw dozens of feathers, white, black, and something in between before they vanished into the shadows. I stood there for a long time, listening. The wings were gone, but the air still trembled with their echo. When I finally went back down, Nama asked what was wrong. I told her nothing, but I kept my eyes on the ceiling, waiting for another shadow to move. The dawn that came hours later was pale and strange. The rain had stopped completely. For the first time, sunlight filtered weakly through the vent. Everyone was smiling, even Ham. We could hear birds outside. Many birds. Too many. Nama said, "They've come back." But I wasn't sure they were the same ones that left. I didn't tell her about the thing I saw in the rafters, or the dark water still seeping between the boards. Instead, I wrote this entry, and beside it, the feather, white, black, and gray all at once. Maybe the world is drying. Maybe something else is waking. Either way, the silence won't last long.